Colt Army Model 1860 Revolver. Samuel Colt's factory finalized the Army Model 1860 in the year on its name and began production immediately, running until 1873. It scaled the proven 1851 Navy frame to .44 caliber by using a rebated cylinder and a round-profile 8-inch barrel, with the creeping loading lever borrowed from Colt's 1855 side hammer. As a cap-and-ball, single-action revolver, it gave Union cavalry and officers a compact 6-shot sidearm at a time when many troops still carried single-shot pistols. More than 2,000 were built, with the U.S. government buying the majority, and early commercial deliveries reached Southern dealers before the war erupted. Chambered in 44-round ball over loose powder or paper cartridges, the 1860 combined moderate recoil with useful terminal effect at typical handgun distances. The hammer-notch rear sight and slender grip frame made it fast to point, even though the simple sights limited precision beyond 50 to 75 yards. Its open top frame saved weight compared to a Remington 1858's solid top strap, but removing the barrel was required to pull the cylinder, which slowed reloads relative to the Remington's quick swap approach. A detachable shoulder stock, sometimes hollowed as a canteen, extended practical range for mounted use. Early-issue cylinders carried a roller-engraved Texas Navy battle scene. A short run of early fluted cylinder guns gained the Texas model nickname, and a small number were later converted at the factory to fire .44 Colt metallic cartridges with a loading gate. Spencer Repeating Rifle. Christopher Spencer's lever-action repeater reached working form in 1860 and entered U.S. service in 1863 after demonstrations that impressed the Lincoln administration. Built first by the Spencer Repeating Rifle Company and later under contract by Burnside, the design combined a manually cocked hammer with a tilting breech block actuated by a short lever stroke. 7 rimfire cartridges rode in a magazine tube in the butt, with 56-56, the early standard, and later 56-52 and 56-50 options as manufacturing matured. In an era of muzzle-loading infantry arms, a waterproof metallic cartridge and a compact magazine were transformational. Rate of fire in trained hands commonly reached 14 to 20 rounds per minute, roughly an order of magnitude over a muzzle loader under combat conditions. The rifle's ergonomics kept the sights largely undisturbed through the lever cycle, and its robust receiver tolerated the dirt and vibration of mounted operations. The Blakesley cartridge box, essentially tubes pre-packed with 7 rounds, allowed rapid replenishment by dumping a tube directly into the stock magazine. Effective range ran to several hundred yards with the .52 caliber bullets, with practical accuracy improving when centerfire conversions later appeared. Union-mounted infantry used Spencers to upset traditional attack timing. Small units could deliver sustained fire that blunted assaults long before bayonet distance. The carbine variant became a staple of late-war cavalry and then of frontier units in the Indian Wars. John Wilkes Booth was captured with a Spencer carbine, and early in his career, George Armstrong Custer carried one. Lee Enfield SMLE Mark III. Britain's Lee Enfield story began with the 1888 Lee Metford, but the smokeless powder rifling problem led RSAF Enfield to new square-shouldered Enfield rifling and the rifle magazine Lee Enfield in 1895. The short magazine Lee Enfield Mark III of 1907 brought the pattern to maturity with charger loading, a 10-round detachable box magazine, and a refined sight line. The core mechanics were James Paris Lee's rear-locking, short-throw bolt, with helical locking surfaces that closed smoothly even when fouled, encouraging fast, controlled fire. More than 10 million Lee Enfields of all marks were built through mid-century. The .30-03 British cartridge and a slick action allowed trained riflemen to deliver 20-30 aimed shots per minute, memorialized in the pre-war Mad Minute exercise. A magazine cutoff appeared early to enforce ammunition discipline, then vanished during wartime simplification. The SMLE's compact overall length balanced trench handling with acceptable sight radius. Later, No. 4 rifles moved the rear sight to the receiver and adopted a heavier barrel, while the No. 5 jungle carbine trimmed weight and length for airborne and jungle operations at the cost of increased recoil and reports of wandering zero. The action hosted an entire ecosystem: cup discharger grenade launching, .22 caliber training conversions, and sniper variants such as the No. 4T with no .32 optics, which evolved to the 7.62 by 51 L42A1 and lasted into the 1990s. Post-World War I, India produced new-build 7.62 rifles as the 2A2A1. Modern service faded by the late 20th century, but the pattern persists in ceremonial roles and civilian matches, and surplus examples remain common, alongside unsafe Khyber Pass copies that mimic markings with mixed metallurgy. Lewis gun. Colonel Isaac Newton Lewis finalized his air-cooled light machine gun in 1911, drawing on earlier Samuel McLean work and adopting a rotating open bolt action driven by gas. With U.S. ordnance uninterested, Lewis moved production to Europe. The Birmingham Small Arms Company and Savage Arms manufactured the gun from 1913. The signature features were a top-mounted 47 or 97-round pan magazine and an aluminum-finned radiator inside an external barrel shroud that induced airflow during firing. At roughly half the mass of a water-cooled Vickers, it brought near-crew-served firepower to a mobile team. Typical ground guns in 30-03 British cycled at 500-600 rounds per minute, fast enough to suppress without immediately overwhelming ammunition bearers. The pan magazine fed positively in mud and cold that could foul strip belts, and the receiver tolerated field stripping by soldiers who were drilled sometimes to the point of reassembling all 100-plus parts blindfolded. Aircraft models in 30-03 and later 30-06 pushed rate of fire higher and shed the shroud for airflow, making the Lewis a standard early aircraft gun until synchronization systems matured. German troops called it the Belgian rattlesnake for its sound and origin. British infantry organized 7-man teams around it for raids and advancing fire in 1915-18, and the gun migrated onto tanks and naval mounts. Interwar, the Bren gradually displaced it, but the Home Guard, Royal Navy, and Commonwealth forces put it back to work in 1940-42 when equipment was scarce. M1 Garand. John C. Garand's gas-operated semi-automatic rifle reached a definitive pattern in 1936, after years of work at Springfield Armory. The U.S. rifle, caliber .30, M1 combined a rotating bolt with a long-stroke gas system and an internal 8-round magazine loaded by N-block clips. It was the first standard-issue semi-automatic service rifle of a major power, with full-scale production arriving by 1940-41 at Springfield and later at Winchester, International Harvester, and Harrington and Richardson. In 30-06, the rifle delivered controllable, repeatable fire at combat ranges with the durability needed for mass conscript use. Clip loading governed handling. The bolt locked back after the last shot and ejected the clip with the famous ping, inviting a fresh clip from a cartridge belt rather than individual rounds. In trained hands, practical rates of 40 to 50 shots per minute were routine, tripling the bolt action tempo of many adversaries. A robust forged receiver, protected sights, and bayonet mounting made it a true line infantry arm rather than a delicate self-loader. And the design accepted a rifle grenade launcher and other field accessories. General George S. Patton's praise is often quoted, but the more important point is doctrinal. U.S. infantry squads could apply aimed semi-automatic fire en masse, changing how fire superiority was achieved. Sniper variants, the M1C and M1D, mounted optics offset to clear the clip slot and served through Korea and into Vietnam. Post-World War II allies received enormous numbers under aid programs. Some navies converted rifles to 7.62 by 51. Italy's Beretta BM-59 evolved the action into a detachable magazine, 7.62 rifle with modern furniture. And the U.S. M14 took the basic architecture into selective fire service before NATO 5.56 concepts took hold. Today, the civilian marksmanship program circulates refurbished rifles to shooters and museums, and the M1 remains a fixture of historical matches. MG42. Werner Gruner and the Gross-Fuss firm delivered the MG42 to German forces in 1942 as a high-rate, stamped steel general-purpose machine gun to replace or supplement the more labor-intensive MG34. Roller-locked and recoil-operated, it was engineered for speed of manufacture and speed of fire. With a 530mm quick-change barrel and push-through belt feed, the gun typically ran near 200 rounds per minute, a ripping cloth cadence that made short bursts remarkably dense and made the weapon both feared and logistically demanding. In squad doctrine, the MG was the center of gravity. Riflemen served ammunition, protected the gun, and maneuvered around its fire. The MG42's Lafette tripod added a T&E mechanism and optics to deliver beaten zone fire at long range or on fixed lines for night and indirect use. The barrel change took seconds with a side-hinged access door, and crews wore asbestos mitts and rotated barrels on schedule to manage heat. Non-disintegrating belts in 50 and 250 round lengths rode from drums or boxes. Feed mechanisms were tolerant of mud and snow in a way that contemporaries often were not. Post-war service and influence were broad. West Germany's MG1 and MG3 converted the pattern to 7.62 by 51, and Austria's MG74 refined the trigger group and furniture. Yugoslavia's M53 kept the wartime pattern alive in 7.92 by 57 and later in export. M2 carbine. The selective fire M2 evolved directly from the M1 carbine program. The Ordnance Department had fielded the light, short-stroke gas carbine in .30 carbine to arm officers, airborne troops, and support personnel with something more capable than a sidearm but lighter than the M1 rifle. In 1944, the selective fire variant was standardized as carbine caliber .30 M2, with Inland and Winchester beginning production in May 1945. The selector on the left face of the receiver controlled semi-automatic or full automatic fire, and a curved 30-round magazine supported sustained bursts. Mechanically, the M2 retained the rotating bolt and tappet piston credited to David Marshall Williams, with strengthened components and a heavier forend to improve controllability on auto. Cyclic rate generally fell in the 750 to 850 rounds per minute range. The cartridge produced mild recoil, keeping the sights useful through short bursts, and the compact package could be slung across chest rigs and flak vests without snagging in vehicles. Flash hiders and night fighting accessories migrated from late war experiments to Korean War use as the carbine family matured. Korea made the M2 a common sight, and early advisors in Vietnam carried it before 5.56 rifles proliferated. The carbine's intermediate performance split the difference between submachine guns and full-size service rifles, and in close terrain, it gave small units quick, concentrated fire. Critiques about winter clothing penetration in Korea exist alongside praise for handiness in hill fighting. Both views reflect context. The night-fighting M3, essentially an M2 hosting an infrared sniper scope, extended the concept into specialized roles. Arsenal kits later converted many M1s to M2 specification, and the platform spread widely through U.S. aid programs in Asia. ppsh 41. Georgy Shpagин's ppsh-41 reached production late in 1941 as the Soviet answer to the need for a cheap, stamped submachine gun after the Winter War exposed shortcomings in PPD-40 manufacture. using a simple blowback action firing from an open bolt, with a hinged receiver for quick field stripping. The pattern leveraged stamping to reduce machine time drastically. Chrome-lined bores and chambers endured corrosive primers, and barrels frequently came by cutting Mosin Nagant blanks in half. The standard chambering was 7.62 by 25 Tokarev, a high-velocity pistol cartridge that produced flat trajectories for a submachine gun. At roughly 1,250 rounds per minute, rate of fire was exceptionally high. The 71-round drum promised extended bursts, though reliable function often meant loading below nominal capacity. A 35-round box magazine simplified logistics as the war progressed. The compensator cut into the barrel shroud helped manage climb, and troops typically gripped the magazine body or the shroud rather than a dedicated forearm. Effective range lived in the 150 to 200 meter envelope, with coarse two-position sights reflecting intended use. Soviet doctrine concentrated ppsh guns at platoon and company scale for urban assaults, trench raids, and forest fighting where volume trumped precision. German forces designated captured examples MP717RE and created 9x19 conversions as MP41 homage to exploit logistics. Production topped several million by 1945, and licenses or copies appeared in China as the Type 50 and in North Korea as the Type 49. AK-47, Type 56. The Soviet AK pattern settled into service in the late 1940s and spread widely in the 1950s, with China beginning licensed production of the Type 56 after receiving technical data mid-decade. The design married a long-stroke gas piston and rotating bolt to a loose-tolerance stamped or milled receiver, depending on generation, feeding from a curved 30-round magazine of intermediate 7.62 by 39 ammunition. The cartridge marked a shift from full-power rifle rounds to a mid-range ballistically efficient option that permitted light, controllable automatic fire, and higher carried ammunition loads. Selector geometry allowed safe, full auto, and semi-auto positions with a large right-side lever. Simple notch and post sights and a substantial front hood helped in rough handling. The rifle tolerated mud, moisture, temperature swings, and indifferent maintenance to a degree that made it viable for largely conscripted armies and irregular forces. Recoil impulse remained moderate, letting minimally trained soldiers keep shots on target in short bursts at typical engagement distances inside 300 meters. Production across Soviet, Chinese, Warsaw Pact, and aligned factories saturated global stocks. By the mid-1960s, AK-pattern rifles were common in Southeast Asia. The Type 56 inches particular equipped NVA and Viet Cong units in large numbers. Guerrilla doctrine exploited the rifle's reliability and weight of fire in close vegetation, while the logistics of intermediate cartridges allowed fighters to carry substantial ammunition loads. M60 machine gun? The American M60 emerged from early 1950s efforts to field a lighter general-purpose machine gun by combining lessons from the German FG-42 and MG-42 with U.S. manufacturing practices. Type classified in 1957, after trials as the T-161E3, it reached widespread issue around 1960. A gas-operated, short-stroke piston drove a carrier and rotating bolt, feeding 7.62 by 51 NATO from disintegrating M13 linked belts. The receiver's straight-line layout ran the operating components into the butt, trimming overall length and aiding controllability from the shoulder, bipod, or tripod. A quick-change barrel supported sustained fire, and a practical cyclic rate around 550 to 650 rounds per minute balanced ammo consumption with suppression. Crews commonly consisted of gunner, assistant gunner with spare barrel, and ammunition bearer, and infantry rifle squads redistributed linked belts so the gun could maintain a base of fire. In Vietnam, the M60 earned the nickname the Pig for weight and appetite. Yet its handling and punch at range made it valuable on patrol, in ambushes, and as a door gun on helicopters. Improvised solutions feed chutes from backpacks. Shortened barrels among Navy Special Warfare units reflected how crews tailored it to mission. Field reliability suffered in harsh conditions. Extractor issues, fragile spring clips on the trigger housing, and an easily snagged barrel latch drove redesigns. The lighter M60E3 addressed mass and ergonomics in the 1980s, but did not fully cure durability problems. The more robust M60E4, designated Mark 43 in U.S. Navy service, improved reliability and mounting options, and the M60E6 further reduced weight and refined the quick-change barrel, finding adoption abroad. If this video was useful, a like, a share with others interested in small arms history, and a subscription for future installments are appreciated. Topic suggestions are more than welcome in the comments section. Thanks for watching.